Hey, Yute, do you know anything about this guy?
Are you kidding me? Okay, lesson time. Get that out of here.
Hey, I was gonna eat that.
Jan Gehl is nothing short of a legend. The guy's pretty much written the book on public spaces. I mean, literally. He wrote The Life Between Buildings, City for People, How to Study Public Life, New City Spaces, and Public Spaces, Public Life.
Okay.
He's also the focus of a documentary called The Human Scale, which has a rating of 7.3 on IMDb, and that scores it better than Madagascar 3 and Wayne's World.
I think you're comparing apples to oranges here, but anyways, I'm looking at his Wikipedia page right now and it says he's a professor from Copenhagen. That's like the world cycling capital, right?
Yup, but it didn't used to be. Back in the 60s, Copenhagen was a city like many others, meaning it had a lot of car traffic. But that all changed with projects like the Stroget in 1962, which saw its streets being closed to cars and turned into public spaces and patios for pedestrians, not to mention the huge improvements to bike infrastructure. Well, Jan Gehl spent much of his formative years studying and advocating for this change. His research paved the way for car-free zones around the world in cities like New York, Moscow, Sao Paulo, Mexico City, Amman, Brighton, Melbourne, London, and Sydney.
Okay, but the car is an essential part of a city. People have to get around somehow.
Of course, but it's not about trying to get rid of cars. It's about making places better for people. For much of the last century, transportation engineers and urban planners were pretty focused on how to make cities accommodate traffic, and how to make them look nice and organized on paper. We tore down a lot of older houses for highways and parking, and developed buildings that only look good from the bird's eye view or in an architecture magazine. But Jan Gehl was one of those first people to realize that pretty designs on paper don't necessarily translate to a good experience on the ground. He said, hey, why don't we design cities for, people?
He actually said that?
Well, I'm paraphrasing a bit, but he also said, a good city is like a good party. People stay longer than really necessary because they're enjoying themselves. And I think that's the main point here. It doesn't matter how quickly you move or how big your house is in the city, if at the end of the day you aren't enjoying life.
Okay, well that sounds nice, but it's a bit fluffy, don't you think?
Well, that's why we're trying out things like closing Argyle Street to car traffic or redeveloping the Cogswell Interchange soon-ish. It's why the Waterfront Boardwalk in the summertime is so...
Jan Gehlig?
Nice one. Well, that was last year, just before Jan Gehl came to Halifax. And when he got here, well, he had a few things to say.
The latest they found out, and that would be the doctors, and that has not just been published worldwide, that it gives you much better life to live in cities than to live in suburbs.
Right.
Because in the cities you walk much more naturally, while in the suburbs you're forced to drive much more. So what we call the sitting syndrome, which is a very big killer of people, more serious now than the smoking.
Yes.
That is especially widespread in the suburbs. World Health Organization, they recommend that all cities organize their cities so that people walk and bicycle as much as possible, so that they can have a long life and not be expensive for the health system. And that is some new tones which have a very strong bearing on city planning now. That's why Boggers and I will have to run around with the step meter.
Right.
And many people do have that now, and I have a disagreement with the doctor. So now it's 6,000. And that is normally what I do I should do 10,000 a day. But then I go to Venice for 2 days, and at once 11,300 and 10,500, and you didn't even notice because it's such lovely places you walk in, and you, of course, you have to walk, because how else do you get there smartly? And actually, the big question everywhere is what to do with the bloody suburbs.
Yes.
They've been there for 50 years. Are they going there to be there for 50 more years? Here we have a city with quite a bit of potential.
Yes.
Very compact. If you have a climate which is very dependent on having frequent and strong winds, and then you have a number of issues with high buildings, because they generate sometimes 4 times as much velocity of wind at the ground, and they make great shadows in northern areas, because there's nothing in the world which we appreciate more than a nice day, a nice climate, and actually you can do so much to get the best out of your climate, and you can also make it much worse.
Right.
In California, they can put important things for referendum. So they had a referendum. Would you like more wind and less sun? Please raise your hands. And that was the end of high rise in San Francisco.
Interesting. Interesting. Interesting.
Because nobody wants more wind and less sunshine, especially not in these areas,
Right.
where we can actually transport our climate 1,000 kilometers to the south if we are careful.
Right.
We realize climate is important, and we don't want anybody to interfere with this in a negative direction. I would love it for the whole of Halifax. But at least one could make a zone saying here are the climate rules are ruling here. Because we would like one place in Halifax to be very pleasant and not overshadowed and whatever. One exercise would be to take a map of the city and find out where the sun is.
Yes.
And then realize this is important site. The Waterfront in Oslo, they were to develop a new area, and suddenly the whole coast was freed and it was to be built up. And these guys who were going to do the builders, they had another area, and they had come to the realization in this other area that people did not come down to the waterfront because of the shops they had or because of the offices or the cinemas or anything. They came down because of the water and the public spaces. And because they came down, because it was very attractive as an area, all the shops were doing well and the restaurants were doing well and the developers were making a killing. So for the new one, they said that we know that the public spaces and the quality of public spaces is very important for the value of the area. And they would even say the public spaces and the quality of them, that is the one which will secure our investments for a long time in the future. So they asked our firm to make a plan for a perfect waterfront in that area. And also where could buildings support this waterfront? And then what should be in the ground floors of these buildings to support these ideas? And we had to point out that this corner is very important, and this place and here and there. And then they say that we will have a policy that maybe if we need a flower shop, that will be free. If we need a little art gallery, that will be free. If you come with Mercedes-Benz, you will be shown away because you will not add to the ambience. So it would be small units. And generally they say if we can make a nice waterfront, we can make all the rent in all the other floors, we can make them quite a bit back inland, because that would be the magnet and the destination which brings people to this area. If we make a number of big architect buildings with blank facades, whatever, or we allow Mercedes-Benz and other showroom places to move in here, then the whole thing will lose in value. By far the waterfront is the #1 attraction in Halifax. Maybe wrong, but I think so. So everything should be done to make that more fantastic and to make everybody aware of this and make the locals use it as much as possible. But then it also becomes attractive for visitors. That's fine, but it's for the locals. The other issue then is to have to link the waterfront with the land behind. But this, to have these two things linked is very, very important for the commercial situation in the city, and also to have a total experience, so that Halifax is not only a walk on the boardwalk.
Right.
So will this be one of the major links?
Yeah.
Then this crossing should be absolutely addressed, so that this flow
More pedestrian.
is emphasized, and the other flow you have to go up and go down again or something.
Nice park.
Maybe if this is an important link to the city, maybe there should be the cars should go on some other links
Yeah.
that are. So
in our roadway.
we must emphasize this bridge idea with everything we've got, so that these will point to the city and not look like an obstacle course.
Yeah.
And especially a city like this one, which is increasingly going to make a living out of being extraordinarily attractive and built on its history and its fabric. It would be important that the traffic is not prioritized too much. This link is crucial.
Yes.
Okay. Of it.
And I can see about 10 cars parked here. Do they need to be parked there?
No.
Depends on who you talk to.
It depends who you talk to.
If you talk to MBH Land.